Welcome, everybody. You are at the Guided Pathways What is My Role session. My name is Kaylon McCabe, and I am going to be facilitating with Becky Zhong. Your presenters today are Michael Takeda, Nick Lucio, Sherilyn Krill Hornsby.
And Susie Nitzel. Don't forget me, Kaylon.
I did. I said you second, Miss Susie Q.
I'm not hearing you. Sorry.
Few reminders for the base. Oh, I'm sorry. And your interpreter today is going to be Terry Barkman. We do ask for some basic Zoom etiquette reminders. If you're not speaking, would you please mute your mics? This also helps prevent excess noise coming in, and it helps the presenters have a clearer presentation. Please raise your hands in the participants window if you have questions, and also use the chat. So what's going to happen is first we'll look at the chat questions, and then the group will get to the raised hands. And your flex attendance is tracked by the participants report that Zoom generates. So we're not going to take your attendance via the chat feature today. Thanks very much and enjoy the session.
All right, so welcome everyone. So the basic idea for this session, so that we sort of have some context for everything, is that the four of us, Sherilyn, myself, Nick, and then Susie, we're going to share some broad perspectives about our different roles within Guided Pathways, and then use that as sort of a springboard for discussion, so that we can then have an interactive session with all of you just to talk about the different roles that we play in the Guided Pathways overall framework. So we're going to start out with just a few polls to kind of get a sense of where we're all at and what areas that we're in. So if you could go ahead and just take a little bit of time to fill out some of these questions. And so I guess while you're all doing that, I guess maybe the four of us can all introduce ourselves. My name is Michael Takeda. I am an English instructor at Fresno City College.
Hi, everybody. I'm sorry.
Sorry, we did not
Sorry
make
about
an
that,
order.
Sherilyn.
Go ahead, Susie.
I'm Susie Nitzel, and I'm the Professional Development Coordinator. I'm also the Classified Senate President. And I apologize, I can't be live for you on screen. My video was working perfectly for the last session, but now it's got, so you have to deal with Grogu.
And hi, my name is Nicholas Lucio. I am the Culture, Education, and Society Pathway Counselor and lead for that pathway.
And my name is Sherilyn Krill Hornsby. I am the Dean of Social Sciences and the Instructional Dean as lead for the Culture, Education, and Society Pathway team.
Great. I guess I should have also mentioned that I am the humanities representative for the Guided Pathways work group.
So Chris, you're an other. If you don't work in one of the 4 VP areas, then you work directly for the president. Okay, so our next poll we want to know is, so share your understanding of Guided Pathways and equity. So Michael, while they're finishing that up, you want to do your description?
Sure. So I know that many of you have at least heard of guided pathways. So we have varying levels of familiarity. I'm kind of looking here. But one of the things that we wanted to really dive into today is how our roles play a part of guided pathways. Again, sometimes guided pathways can be this kind of thing that we hear about, that we've heard a little bit about, but we don't necessarily see ourselves in. So basically, guided pathways was this effort that started. It started in at the national level quite some time ago, and then it's sort of slowly made its way through different areas, and then obviously the state of California picked up on it a few years ago, and has really directed a lot of money and energy towards its implementation for the last few years. The idea behind guided pathways really began when thinking about some of the barriers that many of our students face. And so this is kind of the way that equity plays a big role in thinking about guided pathways, because it's many of our disproportionately impacted populations that are struggling to find success in our system and in the system of higher education in general. And so in an effort to close those disproportionately impacted gaps, or those equity gaps as identified by the state chancellor, these two programs, thinking about equity and then guided pathways, work together towards the same goal to address a lot of those barriers. One of the barriers that was identified is that for many students, they had no real way of, or no sort of guided way of choosing a major. One of the things that many of you know and that we realized, and the exact number is now escaping me, but we had something like 275 programs that students could choose from when first applying at Fresno City College. Someone can correct me if that number is way off, but I think it was somewhere in that neighborhood. And as many of our students are first generation college students, trying to choose from a list of 275 degrees and programs is daunting. I mean, it's daunting for students who aren't first generation college students and who do have college experience in their backgrounds, in their family background. So that was part of it. And then, another part of it was looking at the data from across our campus and realizing that on average, our students take 90 units here at Fresno City College before reaching a goal or before transferring. As you all know, 60 units is the minimum requirement necessary for transfer and for a degree in many, at least, of the programs that we have here at Fresno City College. And so 90 seemed like way too much, but also knowing that for many students, they were way above 100. And so what this meant is that students were taking a lot of classes in many cases that they didn't need. And part of that is because of that lack of a clear and direct pathway from the beginning of their college experience to the end. In addition to that, a few years ago, when Fresno City College really first started thinking about guided pathways, our 3-year graduation rate was 16%, 16%, which obviously is way too low. I mean, the state tracks the 6-year data as well. But being that we are a community college, a 2-year institution, a 2-year college, 16% for our 3-year graduation rate seemed to be too low, maybe far too low. And So with all those different barriers that students were facing, and a lot of the data that was guiding some of these decisions, then the Guided Pathways work group was born, and that work over the last few years has then led to, let's see, does everyone able to see the results of the surveys? Yeah, okay. So it looks like we're all kind of spread out across the board in terms of our understanding of the way that equity practices and guided pathways fit into our roles on campus. So I'm going to share something real quick. And so this is our work that we, no, I'm not going to be able to find it. Oh, here we go. The work that we've been doing here at Fresno City College. Here's a short video about our RAM pathways.
Choosing a career can be one of the most important decisions you'll make in your life, but many students entering college just don't know what they want to study yet. The majority of students change their program of study 1 to 4 times while at Fresno City College. This can cost you a lot of extra money and time. To help students find a career and program of study faster, Fresno City College created RAM Pathways. What is a pathway? A pathway is a group of related programs. The programs in each pathway often teach similar skills, can lead to related careers, and may even share some core classes. This makes it easier for you if you end up switching programs within a pathway. There are 5 RAM pathways at Fresno City College: Arts, Communication and Language, Business, Culture, Education and Society, Health and STEM, and Tech and Trades. Besides helping you find a program of study faster and narrowing down your career focus, pathways also offer other benefits. Each pathway has a dedicated student success team that helps you navigate the college experience. Your success team is with you from registration to graduation and can help you access college resources and more. This allows for a more personal and unique college experience. You will have dedicated counselors in your pathway who will help you reach your career and educational goals faster. And finally, since students in each area tend to share similar skills and interests, you'll be able to make some great connections with fellow students and feel supported by those around you. To learn more, explore the RAM pathways and all the related programs at fresnocitycollege.edu/pathways.
All right, so that was just a little bit about the way that Guided Pathways has now been realized and implemented, not fully implemented, but the way we're beginning to implement it here on campus. So one more thing that I wanted to go over. So basically with Guided Pathways, they have these 4 pillars that they've identified, and these 4 pillars are what really provide the overall framework of what Guided Pathways is. Again, Guided Pathways isn't just a unique or discrete sort of program that's off to the side or that some people are doing. It's really a framework for how all of us are incorporated into the work of the college. So the first of those pillars is to create clear curricular pathways to employment and to further education. The second pillar is to help students choose and enter their pathway. The third pillar is help students stay on their path. And then the fourth pillar, ensure that learning is happening with intentional outcomes. So again, right, Guided Pathways can seem like this program that maybe a lot of us don't really have a role in. And so that's kind of the idea behind today is for us to all sort of talk about and understand the ways that our roles fit into again, this framework that really provides the foundation for everything that we are going to be doing moving forward.
Michael, Brett
Yes.
has a question.
Okay.
Is the graduation rate based on earning an associate's degree, or does it take into consideration students who earn certificate of achievements?
So that initially, that from what I remember, that 16% included all of that. Included the certificates of achievement as well as graduation. Although, yes.
It's my understanding, because I believe this is a vision for success metric, that the vision for success metric includes any type of completion, including certificates as well as degree completions.
And so the next piece that we're going to go into, and I guess we'll start with Sherilyn, is just for us to speak about a little bit about what we know and don't know about guided pathways, just to get this conversation started.
Well, I'll try and keep this brief. As the newest dean at the Fresno City College, what I don't know about about pathways at Fresno City College is every detail about how the integration and the beginning of pathways started at this campus. So I don't have a huge amount of the campus history, but what I am deeply involved in and very excited about is where we're at now and where we're progressing through in our evolution of guided pathways and our efforts specifically to start making sure that more and more folks are involved and our understanding of where their roles are in this and integrating this beyond being this sort of siloed concept where you only know what you do and you don't really know why you're doing it or what you could do to make it work better within both the equity and the pathways concepts and frameworks. So I'm very excited about where we're moving forward. I can say that because the state of California as a whole adopted guided pathways across the entire state, we are all still learning both from internally and from our sister colleges how to best refine and define this program. So it is not set in stone how everything will happen in guided pathways. And that's why talking with you and getting you to understand where your roles are and what you can contribute as far as input on that evolution in our work here at Fresno City College is so vital.
And Michael, I can include the history behind all of this as well. Because my particular role, hold on just a second.
Live TV, folks.
Sorry about that. I have some work getting done at the house. The history behind on campus and how we got to the point we are today is specifically we have embedded counselors, our Perkins counselors, and with the Perkins counseling, we were focused specifically in divisions with particular majors that were our CTE. And within that, we were actually embedded not only in the division, but in the disciplines. So us as counselors were attending, the 4 counselors, I should say, were attending department meetings. We were collaborating with the faculty, with curriculum, and really integrating what we do in counseling all together in the entire experience for the students. So my involvement included, as I said, department meetings, our executive meetings, looking at the curriculum, helping with program review in the framework of what we do in counseling and how that applies to the in-classroom experience, so that the student has an overall kind of collaboration with the people that they are directly working with, counseling instructors and then administrators. So what the school did with guided pathways is really looked at what we did in Perkins and as counselors and tried to to share that across the campus by creating these teams where we as counselors aren't focusing on 200 different majors, but rather a smaller amount of majors so that we can be really experts in those areas so that we can help guide students to a better understanding of not only their career, but their options within the career pathway, and all of the classes that are required in order to get them from, from where they are here with us and moving forward, either transfer, getting into their career, or maybe even just learning skills that they need within their current industry. So that's really where the history came in, looking at our embedded counselors and how we served our students within those programs, and looked at how we can change that so that the whole campus is focusing on these smaller populations versus everyone. Let's just try to service everyone and everybody get the same services. Well, now we want them all to get the same services, but in a micro setting with counseling and pathways. Sorry again for all that noise back there. My apologies.
So that's, actually that Nick brought something up that I forgot to mention. And that is that, for many people, they know that we have had pathways before. In fact, there were many pathways that already existed on our campus, in our colleges, prior to guided pathways. I think the thing that's really different is the guided part of that guided pathways, in that it's really been a rethink about the way that we take those students, as Nick said, from the beginning and get them to the end. So it's really thinking about the roles that we all play, right, in the full student experience and the whole student experience. So Susie, do you want to speak to what you know and don't know about guided pathways?
Yes. I've been in on this since probably the very beginning. So when I was going over my notes last night, you'd think I would know a lot more, but things are constantly changing. And I think it's important to point out to everybody here that even though each of us in me and my co-presenters, we represent a constituency group, or for lack of a better word, it's going to be different for all of us. And we're hoping that the presentation leads to all of us discovering what our roles are. So my role in Guided Pathways, obviously, I'm the professional development coordinator, and Guided Pathways involves a lot of professional development. But I know that doesn't help my fellow classified because they're saying, I book facilities for the college. What's my role in that? And I don't know the answer to that. So I do know a lot about Guided Pathways as far as what I do, but as far as my colleagues, I don't know. I think that's something we're discovering every day. I do know that in taking this framework and making it easier for our students to complete their path, that trickles down to making processes easier. So ultimately and ideally, some of these very complicated processes for getting an adjunct paid for something, a magic form has to be created and then 7 people have to sign it. It's a huge, long process, which ultimately hurts our students. So that's what I think we're discovering is just how those, when I say to my facilities assistant, Jill Riversmith, when she says, how does Guided Pathways, what do I have to do with Guided Pathways? Making that process as simple as possible so that we could do the work that we're doing in an efficient and streamlined manner, because ultimately everything that we do is for the students.
Right. And so, yeah, because you brought up facilities just as an example, right? Sometimes we might not even think about facilities as being a part of Guided Pathways, but one of the things that there was a group that that went around and thought about the ways that a student might experience their path through our college, especially when they're, well, our environment now is a little bit different, but when first stepping foot on the campus, right, including obviously parking, but then once they parked, right, how do they clearly get from, to the places they need to go and do, for example, we have, proper signage and clear signage that, so that a student doesn't have to go to one office and then get told to go to another office to find this person and to another office to find that person, right? And the ways that we might be able to streamline, even through something like facilities, that path to make it a little bit easier for them, especially knowing that some of our students are first generation college students, can sometimes feel even more overwhelmed trying to find that clear defined path, even just physically through our campus. So next we wanted to have each of us kind of talk through the ways that we envision our roles in guided pathways implementation, because again, sometimes can be difficult to see, like with the example of facilities, the way this that we fit in our roles. And so, Sherilyn, you want to start talking about how do managers, you think, fit into guided pathways implementation?
So I think my perspective on the integration point between guided pathways and equity work is recognizing that both of these processes is designed around looking at our organizational behaviors and identifying the ones that are perhaps traditional or even perhaps required, but could be done in a different way from a student-centered perspective, and trying to find ways to consider streamlining mechanisms and processes so that these 4 different pillars that we talk about in the guided pathways model really come from an idea of how does the student see this? How does the student experience this? And where have we perhaps unintentionally created, and perhaps intentionally in some cases, created barriers to the student experience of their education? A lot of times in higher education, we've really designed and built things based on longstanding behaviors and ideas that we don't go back and re-examine very often to try and find out how it actually impacts a student, understanding what would be the best options for them as far as an educational path, being brought into the college and onboarded, and what that experience feels like and how they are a participant in it, how they are supported in remaining on that pathway, and then how we as administrators, this is kind of one of the big parts, are really looking at the data and the information about the outcomes to determine whether or not what we're doing is as effective as we think it should be. So honestly, one of the things I think the administrators are most critical in is being a part of groups that combined all different viewpoints from all different parts of the campus, like this one, and listening when people say, we have a great process in A&R for X. I'm not going to pretend like I know enough about A&R to pick a process here, but I have to fill out 5 pieces of paperwork to get this done. And that means I only get to see X number of students. I don't get to actually get through my work efficiently. Is there some way we can fix that? And then the manager's job is to listen and understand whether or not that is a possibility and try and work on ways to help make that a more beneficial process so that the students can be better served.
And
I
I'd
just have
like
a
to-
couple of questions. But Shirley, I just want to real quick, that's a great point. We don't know what, as I said, I don't know what my other classified professionals, what their jobs are or what they entail. I don't know what Sherilyn's job entails. I don't know what Nick's job entails. I don't think any of us. It's impossible for us to put each other in each other's shoes. So I think it's important that that communication and that caring and that flexibility and that asking for that knowledge. And Brett has a question. Has there been any discussion about the difference between guided pathways names and division names? Some people in his division are concerned about this and how students might get confused as to the difference between the two. Will this also lead to divisions being dissolved and guided pathways taken over? And then after that, Jerry has a question.
So Brett, for you first. I'm sorry, did you have something else you want? Oh, Nick, did you have something?
Yeah,
you
I
want?
wanted to include in this, and maybe it will also help with answering questions. Humanizing the work that we do. Before we were really out of touch because they're doing their work, I'm doing my work. Everybody was like in their own silos doing what they needed to do. And Guided Pathway really sets a platform for us to collaborate even deeper, but also to create relationships to understand the work that we do, to understand what facility does and how it applies to not only the student, but the work that I do in order for us to get the work done and help the student at the end. And I had given one of the examples in one of our meetings, how admissions and records, when I started cohorts, that was one of my first assignments when I started working here. And I'm quite familiar with cohorts, but I wasn't familiar with the work that needed to be done in the back end and in admissions and records. And when I got in touch with one of my contacts in admissions and record, she had said, you can't just send me a list and say enroll these students because everybody has a different registration date. There are holes, there's just more to just this is the student and they need to be enrolled. So we really got a chance to collaborate so that when I handed her my work, I knew what she needed so that my students could be served at the right time with the right information and enrolled in the classes. But I also knew why I was doing all of those things. It wasn't just because Nancy Withrow wanted it this way. It was because that was the best way to serve the student. But again, it was having those conversations with her to understand what is it that she needed so that I can get my students enrolled in the classes that they needed to get enrolled in. And again, just humanizing what we do and understanding the work that we do so that we then can collaborate together and get this work done and get our students served. Sorry, I just wanted to include that and piggyback on that, Sherilyn. And go ahead and get that question answered for the division and the guided pathways, because that one's a little in-depth. That's
It is.
Out there beforehand.
So I want to start out by saying that to my knowledge, there is no intention of dissolving and reforming the divisions into pathways groups. My understanding is that largely the way that the pathways were formed has more to do with what is a logical course progression under meta majors that allow for students to have like a general ed in a particular area that if they shift within their path, they're more likely to be able to continue without having to take a bunch of new courses. And that is really more how the pathways are grouped versus the divisions, which, are not necessarily grouped in that same methodology. Because you can have, obviously we have students in social sciences that are taking all kinds of general ed that have, that are not a social science major. And the same thing with math. So we do have these crossovers. My understanding is that the divisions are not intended to be the student facing part of guided pathways. One of the things that's going on right now, and this is again, we're in these baby step stages, and I'm sure it is confusing for students currently because it's confusing for us, is the communication of guided pathways as the student facing aspect of coming to college. So they're working on websites and communications and this conversation about us more understanding how what we do in guided pathways fits together so that when a student comes in and says, okay, I have to figure out what I want to do as a major, and I'm in the culture, education, and society pathway, how do I do that? What they experience is not, oh, well, I'm a history major trying to figure this out. That's why I'm in that pathway. What they experience is the counselors from that culture, education, and society pathway team supporting them as a student in helping them define their major and come up with their SEP. it's not that the students are not going to show up on campus and say, why does that building say social sciences and why does that building say humanities, and have some confusion there potentially. But the academic structure of the divisions is a different institutional structure versus the guided pathways structure, which is a, how do I say this? A communication method for how to help students better connect and follow a educational course that actually is consistent and allows them to create a more community within their pathway, because they are all together in this pathway group that gets a lot of communication from their pathways teams and gets a lot of contact together so that they have that more cohorted feeling. So they are going to all experience their own academic path when it comes to I am a this major, I am a this major, but their supportive experience that wraps around them is the pathway that then helps them through that path in an effective manner. And so, Brett, I hope that was helpful. I'm not entirely sure if it was, but we are still evolving that understanding where the students are getting are seeing primarily the pathway, while we still have an internally in the institution, we still have an understanding of the divisions and their individual roles in educating those students.
Absolutely. Jerry, go ahead and ask your question.
So I feel as a counselor, just from what I'm hearing, and maybe other counselors could chime in, or if they feel like they want to chime in. I feel like this sounds so confusing for students. That's just from my vantage point, because I know that in our area, we have so many student-focused unification and events and practices that get our student to their outcome. And I feel like when students are out in the parameter of the discussion rather than within the parameter of discussion, then they're off their rail, okay? Because if a student comes to me for a pathway for allied health, it's clear, it's specific, it's follow-up, it's case management, it is check-in in the process, in progress, in the middle, in the end. That's what I do with my students. And I feel like if students are hearing all of these things, I feel like it's confusing to the students. I know since I've moved from the APA division to the counseling student services, it's been so helpful to see all of what the counselors are doing. So I think that for me, as a longtime counselor, like Nick said, we have to have specific guidelines. We have to know who our resources are. We have to know our advocacy voice. And we have to make sure that data is released to all. Data is not at a dean's level or administrative level. As a matter of fact, data is at the level for us as counselors. We all have master's degree. We can figure that stuff out very easily. That data is distributed to us. So we make interpretation, we disaggregate these data and then come up with implementation, not just what we think in our head. As counselors, we move to that implementation section. And when we get students, we make sure that their GE is correct. And if they switch their major, that GE isn't necessarily going to change. So I just want to make sure for us that the student is not being bombarded with stuff and they're confused right at the first level when they get to us. Because I think the pathway is supposed to clear those things up and it's supposed to be specific and so they can get to their end goal.
I appreciate that. And I do agree with you that it is important that the data and I did not by any means intend to say that the deans and the administrators are the only people who should look at data. I just think that it's definitely a part of our task goal that we have to. I think it is very important that people who are actually in the roles that directly impact some of these data points have access to it so they can look at it and say, we think we know why this is happening this way. Because as a couple different people have pointed out, we are not necessarily in that frontline position to say that, well, this makes sense because we're doing X. And that's why this is probably happening. We won't know for certain, but we think this is what is definitely, something we need to address. So I agree with you. I absolutely think that the sharing of the data and specific to what people are doing in their roles is beneficial because it really gives them a chance to examine what is and isn't working from the data analysis standpoint. in addition, which is, you know, the quantitative data, right? The qualitative data is what they're experiencing every day and working with the students that are in front of them. So I think it's good to have both of those so that when you are coming up with solutions, you're kind of seeing the whole picture and being able to to enact it. Now, I will tell you, I don't know, because I am new to this role, how exactly data is normally shared, but I'm making some notes here and I do appreciate that input.
And I can tell you, Sherilyn and everyone else, prior to Guided Pathways, the data for me was trying to figure it out, like trying to scramble to get the information. I feel since we've implemented Guided Pathways, I have more access to that data, and we utilize that quite frequently. I mean, it's what we do, it's the drive that we do in all of the meetings that we hold for our pathway, whether it be our leadership meeting or the team meeting. We are really sharing that data with our colleagues and utilizing that data to make decisions for the student, to benefit the students. So it's been quite a interesting ride to see how this data is presented and how we can utilize it to then do the work that we do in counseling and other areas of the campus.
Roberto has a question. Is the goal with Guided Pathways to decentralize one main location of counseling and house counselors per pathway or division?
Nick, you want to take that one?
You know, I don't believe that. Actually, I think it's quite opposite because, and I can say this because I was embedded in social sciences. And this year, actually, all counselors are now, and I say all counselors that were embedded elsewhere, and Dr. Santos was talking about this as well. We've moved to counseling. So counselors are are together. Yes, we are separate. Some of us are separate as far as our offices are concerned, but we are meeting as counselors weekly and understanding not only the role that we have within the pathway, but counseling as a whole. So it's kind of a yes and a no answer. We are moving towards that pathway model, but we are still maintaining our counseling department, and by adding myself and all of the Perkins counselors and other counselors that were separate, because I would attend network meetings. I would never attend the counseling meetings, and I never knew what was going on in those particular meetings. Now that I've been attending the counseling department meetings, I feel so much more informed, not only for what I'm doing within my pathway, but as far as the new procedures, policies that are changing, the things that are happening within counseling, what's going on in other pathways, and how we can implement those strategies within our pathway in culture, education, and society. We get to use what works and what doesn't work, because there are some strategies that work in other pathways that aren't working in our pathway. So it really does allow us to share, and going back to that humanizing, it really is helping me to understand everyone's work. And Dr. Santos said this as well, going into those meetings, she's now able to see and understand what we're all doing. So it is really helpful to us to not only focus on our pathway, but also look at all the other pathways and how we can utilize the different ideas that are being used in those areas and bring it to our pathway. I hope that answered that question.
And
Farouz has a question also.
Oh, it is just more of a comment. As Nick says, we need to know what goes on in every major. I give you one example. I was working in Extreme Ridge for past 2 days, and they are not screening any students based on their pathways. So I got questions from anywhere, any major, and I need to let the students know and help them. I cannot say, oh, it's not my pathway. So yes, we are divided in different pathways, but at the same time, we need to get together and we need to share information and know anything about everything about any major existing. That was it.
And Farouz, definitely what I also love about that is now we know our resources as well. Who is the expert in what area? So if I am working with an applied technology student, I know who they can go to if I can't answer the question because it's a very specific career oriented or a specific question to classes and scheduling. I know who to refer that student to or what faculty member to refer that student to. Whereas in the past, I just knew go to applied technology, now I know who are the instructors in those areas. This is who you need to talk to about career. Who is the counselors in this area? This is who you need to go to so that you can follow up and ensure that the work that I did with you is the accurate and correct information that you're receiving.
So Nick, I think that's a good segue into, and I know you've kind of touched on some of this as you've been speaking, but really to talk about what specifically do you think your role is in Guided Pathways implementation?
I feel like, especially counselors, even myself, it's bridging that gap between the student and administration and classified. Because I feel like us as counselors, we are that middle person. We see the student on a one-on-one basis, and we see the areas of their needs, and that's where we can then connect our students with the appropriate resources or the faculty member that is, responsible for, whatever the student is looking for. And so many times, we have these forms, these forms that we have to fill out and send from place to place for signatures and more signatures. And this guided pathway framework has really helped me to understand why those signatures go where they go and how we can expedite that so that the person receiving that information understands what we're trying to accomplish. Before, for me, I felt like it was just a paper with no story. And now with Guided Pathways, it's a paper with a story. I have a conversation with, Michael. Hey, Michael, I have a question about an English class and this student who took it out at a different district or in a different state. And what do we need to do? Or what does this student need to do? And here's the story behind this student and what we're trying to accomplish. So it's really, really helped me to be able to, again, humanize and understand the components to what we're trying to accomplish and not just send a paper through and say, hey, we're trying to get this class to be a substitute or an equivalent, but really have a deeper understanding of why and what these processes are and how we can benefit the student. And maybe there is a process that is not working. So what do we need to do to fix that? And that has been really key also to Guided Pathways, is understanding the things that are not working and haven't been working, but now we can address it and actually pinpoint this isn't working and this is why it's not working.
Susie, you haven't spoken in a while. So what is the role of classified professionals in the Guided Pathways implementation?
Well, that's a huge question, right, Michael? Because classified, that's a diverse population. We're serving, some of us serve students directly. I see Janine in the room. She's working directly with our students as they're incoming. I don't work with students at all. So I'm in more of a support field. But even that being said, classified who don't work directly with students as a result of their jobs are still interacting with the students. But again, if you're not, so for instance, when we were on campus, I worked in the president's office with Kim Casada, President Goldsmith's excellent executive assistant. And she and I had this conversation. She goes, I don't know what my role is in this. She goes, I'm just doing my job. And I didn't know what to say to her. And again, it's that process of discovery. I still don't know what I would say to her. I don't know how it would change how she does her job because she does an excellent job. But I think it's just more of a mind shift for a lot of classifieds who don't. Kim comes in contact with a lot of students, trust me. But say, for instance, my colleagues in administrative services, our budget, people in budget, Kathy Gazilski, and I'm thinking Alex, they're working with faculty, they're working with administrators. They don't have a lot of student contact. So what does Guided Pathways mean for how they do their job differently? Fundamentally, it's not going to change how they do their job differently. However, the difference is how they think about how they're doing their job. I think that's an important distinction to make. You're still going to, they're still going to be processing requisitions, and they're still going to be creating POs and all of the many things that they do, paying the bills. But I think there's an important shift that needs to happen for them. Again, what you're doing, what Kathy and Alex and Kim are doing, is tied directly to our student success. Because of them, without paying the bills, we can't help our students. That's
And
it.
I think one of the important things also that everyone has brought up so far is this idea of working together, right? I think that in many cases we've all felt like we worked in our individual areas, our individual divisions, and our individual silos within our roles on campus. But again, as Susie is mentioning with the classified professionals, I mean, that, I think one of the shifts that can happen once they think of themselves as being in support of students, right? Rather than just having a discrete job to do. For example, if you talk about Alex in accounting, that what he's doing is in service of our students, right? And then once that shift happens, then bringing everyone into the conversation about how can we do what's best to serve our students, so that we all have this idea that we are that we know the direction in which we're moving, and that we're all moving together as one unified body, rather than classified professionals and counselors and managers and instructional faculty, but that we're all one. And to Susie's point, I think it's important to note that that oftentimes many classified professionals spend more time with students than people in other roles on campus that it might on its face seem would be more student facing, right? Because many of the classified professionals are the ones that see the students, that talk to the students before they even get to a counselor, or before they even get to a class, or while they're trying to register. And there's such a huge part of that support and that guidance that is a part of, again, keeping the students on the path and helping them to get on the path, and then helping them successfully reach their goal and get out of here with some sort of a meaningful outcome.
So funny you say that, Michael. When I was in administrative services myself, I did HR, and we had student aides, and part of my role was I was supervising the student aides. And I'm looking back at it now, and actually I was practicing Guided Pathways with my student aides before I even knew what it was. They would come to me, and so many of our classified professionals oversee our student aides, and they would come to me and they would say, I went to counseling and there's a line miles long, and I need to know what to do, and can you help me out? And so I would say, let me put you in touch with some people. So yeah, I was practicing Guided Pathways before Guided Pathways was the in thing.
So I was gonna piggyback, and of course my colleagues have done such a great job that I've almost lost my train of thought on this, but I was gonna piggyback on a very interesting point, and this is sort of my before Guided Pathways introduction to Guided Pathways and also equity work, When I was still a classified professional, I was in a meeting on campus that was a bunch of administrators, including the former dean of the Social Sciences Division, Peg Miracle, and they were trying to figure out a new practice for how to implement some practice, right? And this could be anything. This could be accounting services. This could be facilities. This could be anybody. And they had this very intricate, very detailed 12-step process that they thought was going to be really terrific, and that it was going to do all these things and ring all these bells and all these whistles. And Peg at the end, as the meeting, as they were all sort of like wrapping it up, said, great, so how does that help the students? This 12-step process that gets between where they started and where they need to get to, how does that help the students? Like the students. And everybody went, okay. And I think what came out of that was like a 3-step process. So it's not even about if you're in front of the students. This is the mental shift that Susie's talking about. It's about thinking, okay, what I do has an effect ultimately on some student experience. How does the student experience what I'm doing it, and does how we're doing it make sense? That's it. I just wanted to add that.
And so, as far as I'll jump in with the faculty role. The way that I see the faculty role is, right, that in some ways, the faculty role can seem like a singular focus. We have specific content to cover, in that we have a course outline of record to follow, and student learning outcomes to achieve. But the whole student experience is what Guided Pathways is really focused on. And faculty play such a huge role in that overall student experience. In being, I see, Deborah Lewis mentioned something about the mentor teachers. Right, faculty, we have an opportunity to be mentors to students in addition to just being instructors, right? And so outside of our role in the classroom, we have so many other roles that we can play in the process of the students. I mean, when you think about onboarding students, we can play a role in helping to shape and guide what some of that onboarding looks like for students, in ways that we can participate in that, again, outside of our classrooms. And then, I'm reminded of the experience that I had working with Firuz in a part of the early Guided Pathways work, when we were developing the course sequence maps. And it was a great opportunity for myself and some colleagues to be able to sit down with Firuz and work together to talk through what those maps should look like. We had some great conversations about, why this class should come before this class, or why in some of these areas, there might be a few of the general education classes that might work better than some of the others. But being able to have that collaborative conversation with a colleague in another area on campus that's I guess in some ways in another role, was really, really profound for me, and then some of us who were developing those maps with her. And I know that I see many faces here that I know were involved in that process in their areas as well. And so I think it's another thing that's important to think about, is that, right, in many ways, our role, right, our primary role is helping students succeed, right? And that maybe, faculty, at least in my mind, we shouldn't just think of ourselves as faculty, right? But that we spread out, and all of us, right, in all of our roles, right, have one role to play, and that's to support our students and to guide our students and to help them be as successful as they can be. And so that sometimes we need to think outside of just our role and not think about our role as being just faculty or just counseling or just managing or just classified, right? And that we do have one singular role that we all fit into. And so, for me, I think that's the important thing about the faculty role, is that we have so much of an opportunity to help students outside of just what we do inside of the classroom. Maybe now it'd be a good idea to, oh gosh, we only have about 13 more minutes. Open it up to the floor for any of you to talk about the ways that you see your roles in implementation, or if any of you have any questions or comments that you'd like to share.
I have a question, Michael. And I think this kind of gets to the point about everybody being able to find ways in their own areas or things that they've seen that are problematic. Does anybody have an example of a roadblock that you've seen students experiences in their educational path, any part of their educational path, whatever part you're involved in, that the college is in control of, that the college as an organization could make a difference in?
Go ahead and post the answers in the chat too, if you don't feel comfortable speaking. Jerry? Did we lose Jerry? Where'd Jerry go?
Okay, so Mark has one. Mark is asking, I'm assuming, about the availability of services, and I would say this is probably supportive services, probably both direct academic and co-curricular support services for students who are night students. How are we working with students who are not our traditional day students? I don't even know how many of those we have, that to make sure that they have services available to them. And is that I think what Mark was saying. So that is definitely something I see as a roadblock, and it is something the college is in control of. We have to think about, and this is not a dodge, we have to figure out what that would mean about how we would reorient suggestions from staff, how we could reorient schedules perhaps, or staffing in a way that would allow for that to happen, within, of course, all the ridiculous constraints in dealing with things like budget. But I would love to hear if people have ideas about how we could make that happen. Anybody in those service areas have thoughts on that?
I'll throw out real quick on that. I've definitely found that I think something we've learned by being at home and being at distance is the greater flexibility virtual services gives our students. I've had many, many, many students meet with me at lunch breaks. I had one young lady, she was in scrubs in an examination room. And I was like, I think you're at work. And she wouldn't have been able to meet otherwise. And so I think after we get back on campus, it may be a little easier than we think. And it might not mean that every single building and office has to be open and fully staffed until 10 o'clock at night. Just by students being able to meet with us virtually, they may be able to fit in appointments during daytime hours that before they weren't.
Yeah, absolutely, David. And Jerry has her hand up as well. That I was going to throw that out there as well. Since we've been virtual and Zoom, I've had so many more students attend their evening, session. As before, I would be in my office at night, and many times students wouldn't attend their scheduled appointments because there's just so much going on, right? They're working, they have to get to class. By the time it's, their night off, they forget about the appointment, or they may be just exhausted and they can't get to the appointment. this virtual world has really changed that for our students. And absolutely, I've seen that as well, where students are able to book an appointment during their lunch break or they're right before they start work, and they don't have to come on campus. They can get their questions answered. They can meet with a counselor at home and be able to get the services that they're needing, whether it be at night, during lunch, or before they start work. I think Jerry had a question.
Jerry?
I think she put it in the chat.
I think it's essentially that we having transitioned predominantly to online, we've got some things that are coming up for our students that are barriers to their learning, having to do with technical difficulties or other kinds of issues that have to do with the differences between an online instructional experience and a face-to-face instructional experience. Jerry is saying that she's having issues with her mic, I think. What she's saying is that because I'm gonna, Jerry, if I'm making assumptions incorrectly, I apologize. But I think what she's saying is if we take the time to get input from students on what their common issues are, or even talk to instructors about the things that they're commonly hearing from their students that are problematic, if we could come up with some kind of more universal or understanding of how these things can be handled, so that students have an expectation when they're in a class that if something happens in an online environment, they know what the next recourse is, rather than it being perhaps different in every educational course. Jerry, can you answer in the chat? Did I even get close? Okay, yeah, essentially, I think I got that.
Brett?
If I was wrong, I apologize.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, great. Sorry. I just got a question. I don't know if it was Michael or Nick brought up the point about, you know, as instructors, we're going to have to maybe get more involved with the students and stuff like that versus thinking of our role just as instructors. I can just speak for our division, and I know several programs in our division. I mean, we act as advisors and counselors to our students. I know we have counselors, we have great counselors in our division, but we have students constantly coming to us asking questions and stuff. So I know several of our programs in the AT division take an active role just because of the nature of our courses already. I guess a question or a concern would be is how much more to get involved. I say that because Applied Technology is a little bit unique in the sense that, I mean, I've got here almost 200 plus pieces of equipment besides teaching that I've got to work with our instructional tech on keeping up, making sure things are ready for classes. And so that takes a lot of time too, besides the normal instructional environment, office hour environment, division meetings and all that other stuff. So I just want to make sure that, you know, there are instructors out there doing that. I'm not sure how much more time we have to divide out and still be successful. So I just want to make sure. I'm not trying to sound, you know, harsh in a sense. We do give a lot to our students. I mean, we're working with them with advisory members, trying to connect them with employment, with other instructors in our division to help with resumes. And I mean, so we're doing a lot of that stuff. I'm just not sure how much more we can do.
Well, oh, go ahead, Michael.
So, Brett, I think it's a really good point. And, you know, it's such an important role that you play, to your point. I think one of the things that I think about that is that, you know, as we're really trying to figure out exactly what the student success teams are going to look like. I've been part of the success team for my pathway, and one thing I'd like to see is a clear definition of the role of the faculty in those pathways, but also an opportunity for an identification for some faculty to play an official mentorship role within some of those pathways. So, Brett, to your point, you know, perhaps it could look something like, you know, identifying someone in, I guess, sort of like a department chair role, but in a slightly different role that might include something like some release time, but to be an official mentor for your area, so that you could handle that. One person could be designated to handle some of these things, but also be given the time and space and compensation to be able to do that. So that I guess it's so that it's more of sort of, Janine says, like a faculty liaison. It would kind of be like that. Yes, because it perhaps can be done in a more organized way than it is now. But yeah, I mean, I think that what you do in your area is amazing, because it's something that we as faculty need to do, because not only are we experts of our content, but for many of us, we're also experts in our field, which includes resume writing and interviewing and how to get a job and what to expect when you're on the job, and what are some of those skills that you might need that maybe don't show up in some of our outcomes, or on some of our CORs that some of these students might need to be successful in. So we have a wealth of knowledge that we can provide for students. So yeah.
So just a really quick suggestion, as a new dean, watch me say something that's completely not allowed for some reason. But just a quick suggestion, as somebody who used to do a lot of grant development around concepts and pilots that involved using existing systems in different ways to see if they would work. What about the potential in a department area for a group of faculty to organize a once a month time that their office hours sync up, that is advertised to all students in that major, where they do basically a panel with some breakout rooms, similar to what Nicholas has put together for the CES pathway with our counseling support, where they are doing essentially input on exactly the areas Michael was talking about careers oriented towards that particular major, or general questions that they frequently get from students, in an environment where students can come in, and if maybe they're uncomfortable having that one-on-one time with that counselor or with a faculty member, they can just sit there in the group and listen and get information that they would not necessarily have gotten outside of that space. One of the things that we've talked about in CES is there's a lot of intimidation for students sometimes being in a one-on-one environment with faculty. Like, they're just really confused about what office hours are and how to use them and what they can get from them. So if we made it into a more of a group panel discussion with students in a major area, maybe we could answer a lot of questions simultaneously and get them back to them. And then maybe even record and post them so that other students could look at them.
Yeah, it was good. Thank you, Sherilyn and Brett, for the question. When social sciences, when we didn't have pathways, but social sciences, psychology, they actually have a group office hour on Friday where all the full-time faculty in psychology meet in a classroom and invite their students so that they can do just that, either helping students with homework or classwork, or answering questions about the field and career. And we've kind of created that environment virtually as well, with conversations with counselors, which we didn't create. It was actually another pathway team that has this monthly event where they have faculty members, they have counselors, really to create an environment where students feel a little more comfortable, where it's not an office hour, but rather a forum hour. And we are also trying to, in our culture, education, and pathway, we're trying to kind of redefine our office hour and promote office hours so that students feel comfortable with what office hours are. Because we hear a lot of times students aren't coming to office hours, right? They're not utilizing those spaces and times. So we are trying to develop and get input from not only from our faculty, but our students as well, as to what we need to do to better serve our students during those office hours, and how can we create an environment where they feel comfortable to come to us as counselors, faculty members, administrators. And really, that's the development that we're doing right now with that time, because you're absolutely correct. We are strapped for time. We are, you're either teaching, we're in meetings, we're doing all these other things on campus. So we want to utilize our time and space so that we are not over exerting ourselves in one area, but spreading ourselves in a balanced way where we already have those times and space available. We just need to utilize it in a way that students feel comfortable coming to us.
Absolutely, Nick. We're over time. So we want to thank you all for joining us. And as we close out, I just want you guys to consider moving forward. What are some of the relationships that you can foster with your colleagues in order to help us break down these barriers for our students? Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks to my co-presenters, Michael and Nick and Sherilyn. And thank you, Terry, our interpreter. Thank you, Kaylon and Becky, our facilitators. Go have lunch. The next session starts at 1, you guys.
And thank you all for being here and contributing and asking questions. It wouldn't have gone anywhere without that.
And please remember to fill in the survey on this session. The link was sent in the chat. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay, thanks, guys. I'm going to take a well-deserved lunch.
Oh, me too.
I'll
I think
wait
that
till
went really
everybody
well.
leaves.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Yes,
everyone.
thank you so
I was
much.
super nervous. I'm like, what am I